Ladies and gentlemen, we are the last session of the day, but I promise you we have an incredible group of panelists. So please join me on a round of applause to welcome our incredible panelists. We have Constantino Chutas, President of ECOAN and Acción Andina. We have John Eleoterio, Managing Director of Goldman Sachs Sustainability Banking. We have Peter Kness, former CIO of BlackRock and Chairman of One Amazon, and Jaime Niño, Executive Senior Vice President for Latin America and the Caribbean for AECOM. And
Thank you.
Myself, I'm Rodrigo Veloso, founder of One Amazon. It is great to be back here at FII, especially to be here with you in the marvelous city of Rio de Janeiro. We are here together in Brazil, a country that is home of the largest part of the Amazon rainforest. And I encourage this incredible audience to ask yourselves, what is the value of the Amazon rainforest? What is the value of our planet's most precious asset? The Amazon biome has a mind-boggling 750 million hectares and is part of 9 countries, a scale that is truly hard for the human brain to comprehend. To put into perspective, all of the European Union fits inside of the Brazilian Amazon alone. The Amazon is the lungs of our planet and is the world's largest climate regulator. 20% of the world's fresh water that flows into the oceans is in the Amazon. The Amazon has also an incredible biodiversity with thousands of unique species of fish, birds, hundreds of mammals, and over 100 billion tons of carbon stored in its trees. However, it is quickly being destroyed, mostly by market-led forces. Apart from indigenous peoples, the true guardians of the Amazon, over 40 million people call Amazon home. And they are people, just like you and I, that have to provide for their families, and often find themselves to be forced to take part of illegal activities, such as illegal lumber, illegal plantations, illegal mining, just in order to provide. Having that as a context, first question will go to Peter Kness. Peter, at FII in Riyadh, you famously said that the Amazon rainforest is the world's most undervalued asset. Why, in your view, is the Amazon rainforest a profoundly undervalued nature-based asset, and what is One Amazon doing to correct that?
Thank you, Rodrigo. Well, one way to think about it is just imagine that the entire planet was run by an enlightened monarch. And that enlightened monarch woke up one day and its scientists came to them and said, oh, by the way, this is the Amazon rainforest, as you just described, and said, well, 25% of it's been destroyed. Would that enlightened monarch spend $1 trillion to save the Amazon rainforest? Of course it would. It's the lungs of the planet. So that gives you some sense of just the zip code that the Amazon rainforest is in my view. Now, One Amazon's approach to that was to create a partnership, a platform of partners, many of whom you see here today, some you don't, in order to solve that problem, to fill that void, essentially. And we start by partnering with the enlightened governments of Colombia, of Brazil, by which, in partnership with them, to solve this problem. So the other thing what One Amazon is doing is Rodrigo alluded to, is we think of the Amazon as a nature-based asset. We think of it as an asset. In that sense, these ecosystems of the Amazon rainforest, the biome, as Rodrigo mentioned, they give off goods and services, whether that's the timber, whether that's the fish, seafood, whether that's water purification, pollination. They give off a set of services, goods and services, just like other assets. So they deserve to be valued right alongside traditional financial assets. So instead of there just being human capital, like everybody in this room and the people sitting on this panel, instead of there just being produced capital like this building, there's natural capital. There's 3 sources of capital. And so when you take this approach, then you start thinking about, okay, how do I create an asset out of the Amazon rainforest? How do I price this asset that we think is so undervalued, right? Well, the challenge with nature-based assets, as John will discuss, is that birds fly and fish swim and the wind blows and water flows. So the owners of this asset, the governments or the indigenous tribes, can't control the benefits that's being generated by that asset. So it's a classic market failure, right? And so you have to fix that market failure in order to price the asset, right? And so the way what Amazon has approached that is, unfortunately, the technology now exists to actually solve this problem. So we start by creating an asset out of a hectare of the rainforest. Well, in order for an asset to get priced, you first have to give access to the asset. If I can't access the asset, it's not going to ever have any liquidity. So the way we give access to a pool of investors is we digitally represent that hectare of the rainforest. We tokenize it using modern digital technologies, right? It's really actually a real use case of the technology, in my view, right? So now we have a digital representation of a hectare of the rainforest, right, which you can access 24/7 at a low cost. But the investors have to know what's happening to that asset. So we take that tokenized hectare of the rainforest and we put it on a blockchain. So blockchain technology gets used for a lot of things that I think are kind of more or less irrelevant. But this use case is you have an immutable, transparent track record from everything that happens to that token, from A to Z. So now you have a digital representation that gives you access and potential liquidity. You have that token on a blockchain, so you have immutability and audited of any activity of that token. Then, but lastly, you need to be able to understand what it is that token represents, right? So you have to datafy the hectare of the rainforest, right? Because after all, financial products in their simplest forms are just packaged up data that trades in a regulatory framework. That's really all they are, right? They're claims that have been datafied, right? These are claims. So essentially, you have to datafy that. What Amazon does that through something that John will discuss called the Internet of Forest. Basically, what the Internet of Forest is an infrastructure of sensors from biosensing to environmental sensing to social environmental sensing that can basically collect data at scale, both granularly and macroly. So in that sense, you're basically starting to datafy nature. So in fact, for the last 10, 15, 20 years, we've datafied Homo sapiens a lot. They kind of know what we read and what we like and who we're with and where we are and stuff like that. But we're in the early innings of datafying nature. But the technology exists to datafy nature, and it's improving dramatically every week. So now, if you think about what Amazon's done, it's taken and it's created a digital, an asset, a token, a digital representation of the hectare. It's basically put that token on a blockchain to create transparency and auditability. And then it's datafied what that hectare and what's the claim of that hectare. So now we can take that digital asset and we can put it on an exchange and start to trade it. And so we bring market forces into the problem of creating sustainability and saving the rainforest, right? And so that's, in our view, we think that in order to solve the climate change problem, in order to save an asset like the rainforest, we have to bring market forces. Otherwise, it won't be successful. And that's what One Amazon has done.
Thank you, Peter. John, following up on Peter's points, what has been the challenges for developing the market for nature-based solutions and energy transition projects in the Amazonian countries, and how can the Internet of Forest help to address some of these issues?
Great. Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. Thank you for being here. As Peter was mentioning, one of the key fundamental problems that I've seen over the last 25 years is we're trying to look at nature-based solutions as some sort of unique product. It is a unique product, but in order to bring the markets to bear from a financing capability, from a product capability, we're really looking at it the same as every other financial product that's out there. The markets need data. The anchor will be data. Data brings identification, it brings verification and transparency, and products develop around that. What we're seeing as one of the biggest challenges in the market on the nature-based side is really a function of, yes, regulatory dynamics. You have various types of regimes on the carbon side, on compliance sides, on technical credits, but the fundamental nature of each of those problems is started with a either lack of data, lack of verification, lack of ability to demonstrate permanence. So it really hinges on the data. So the ability of Internet of Forest and the ability, as Peter was mentioning, of incorporating today's technology at a low cost, having the ability to tokenize, having the ability to go into a hectare by hectare asset level, you're providing investors with an enormous amount of data to identify what is the progress, what is going on there. And then the question is what's the revenue model when you're thinking of the challenges in nature-based? So what does that bring? And I'm really looking at this from a project perspective of One Amazon as well, is when you're looking at the value creation of that data and you're looking at that, and then you could start to look at investing. Think of the Amazon as encyclopedic knowledge that has not yet come to market. Yes, we need to preserve the Amazon, but the Amazon is an educator. So by pulling that data stream, you're creating multiple opportunity sets on different revenue streams that can be redeployed into other agroforestry, reforestation type programs because of the knowledge base that you're getting from the Amazon. But the value of One Amazon and the model that Peter has described is also creating project capability to invest in energy transition projects to Rodrigo's point. When you're looking at projects and the ecosystem of permanence, it needs to take in the ecosystem of the people in those communities from energy transition. Many folks look at this from a co-benefit standpoint, but it's so much deeper than that. If you're creating an ecosystem with the data, with the jobs, with the information, and extending even that data capture to that, investors have line of sight to the true impact that they're having. They can see a revenue model that is diverse. You'll see known and unknown revenue models coming out of this data. You'll see verification that will help feed the regulatory environment with regards to how to react, how to verify, how to have transparency. And that'll lead to excellent worlds of different amounts of information that's needed to establish markets. You know, every commodity started in a bilateral type discussion and it evolved over time with data into multitude of products. And then that brought investors into those communities. So we do see that as the key anchor to bringing information and data. And then from the project perspective, we're looking at the value creation of One Amazon, and in particular, given my energy transition background, is creating ecosystems around preservation and creating the co-investment in those communities that will demonstrate permanence. If you're investing in those communities, if you're bringing distributed power, distributed energy, things that many, many folks on the different platforms have discussed today with regards to telehealth and teleeducation into those communities, that is true permanence. So you'll be able to create an ecosystem of stability and investment in that, and that all interconnects with Internet of Forest. It's not only the capturing of that data, where are you deploying that data, how is that feeding into the regulatory environment, how are we helping investors who are far off in the markets with verification and accountability and an accounting trail of that data, but also the creation of new revenue streams and new investments back into those communities.
Thank you, John. Jaime, based on the experience of AECOM working in the Colombian Amazon, what are the opportunities and challenges for financing and executing projects in the Amazon?
Thank you, Rodrigo, and I want to also thank FII for the opportunity to address this wonderful crowd. So, look, we've been working in the Amazon for over 20 years. We started working under Plan Colombia with USAID back in 2002, I think, was the beginning. And since then, we've been working with the private sector, with NGOs, and with different interest groups in the area. And perhaps what I would like to highlight is typically a lot of the efforts are small. They almost always remain at a pilot level, and they don't reach the scale or the impact to be sustainable over time. And that is one of our biggest concerns. The opportunity to work with One Amazon and the Colombian government this time is really interesting because going back to what John was saying, and actually what President Lula said earlier today, it's really important to create a partnership between the government, the private sector, the NGO, and the communities. And when I say the communities, I'm not only referencing the indigenous communities, but also the small farmer communities and the large private sector that is today in the Amazon. If we don't work together, we're not going to have the impact that's required. And we're going to have to work, going back to something John said, we're going to have to work not only in how do we do an acai project and make it sustainable. We got to have an impact that's broad because the communities and the regions need regional impact. We need regional impact if we want to make this sustainable. How can we do a sustainable acai project if there are no financial services? If the community has no way of actually accessing the payments or the funds, or they have to move 50 kilometers to get to the closest ATM machine. That's just very difficult, right? So we got to create an ecosystem that makes these opportunities sustainable over time. And so what we're doing in Colombia this time, working with the Colombian government, we've prioritized two projects. One is in the Chiribiquete Park. Chiribiquete is an amazing park that the Colombian government discovered in 1990. I'm not talking 100 years ago, I'm talking only 30 years ago. And it's got these incredible rock formations that go back over 6 million years ago. And it's got these incredible drawings and caves of indigenous communities that have been living in that area for over 4,000 years ago. So the government discovered the area, and since then it's been trying to protect the area from different communities that have been trying to get into the area because it's got incredible gold deposits and so on. And so the government is challenged by the situation. So what One Amazon is allowing us to do this time with the Colombian government is to create a buffer zone around the park where we can do comprehensive projects that have ecotourism, regenerative agriculture, sustainable forestry. We're working with the closest town, which is San Jose del Guaviare. 20 years ago, it was at the center of the civil war in Colombia, to try to create this ecosystem that allows Chiribiquete to be accessible to everybody, but at the same time continues to protect the park and the uncontacted communities within the park. The other interesting thing we're doing, the other interesting project we're doing is working with the Colombian government in implementing an energy transition program, the first large-scale hydrogen production project in Colombia in the coast of Guajira. And this is in line with One Amazon's objective of working in the Amazon, but also in accelerating the energy transition and decarbonization in the Amazonian countries. So that's the key here. I think that if One Amazon comes in and partners with the governments, partners with the NGOs, and we tap into the ancestral knowledge of the communities, into their capabilities, I think we can have an impact at a larger scale.
Thank you so much, Jaime. Talking about ancestral communities, Constantino, you once very famously said, "Everywhere I look, it seemed the problem was mankind. So why not work with the people so they can be part of the solution?" There are over 2 million indigenous people in the Amazons, which they are the ancestral guardians of the forests. And these people hold immense knowledge and wisdom. Constantino, how can we unlock and tap into the ancestral knowledge of communities to improve governance and expand market-based solutions?
Thank you so much for the question. I'm going to try to be realistic. Every time when I visit the local communities and native communities, mostly I ask them why you are not accepting the programs and why you are not accepting the conservation. And the local communities, they say immediately, we need respect. We need respect and also a time for dialogue, to be listened, and probably we can teach you what to do. Sometimes, all these people, they are so tired to be the front page of the magazines or the videos. They want to be part of the solution. They need jobs. They need a lot of capacitation also. In 880, after Jesus Christ, a huge climate change tackled along all the Pacific coast, killing most of the pre-Inca cultures. The remainings climbed up of the mountains looking for better conditions. But these people didn't cry. They don't sit down and adapt to the climate change. These guys arrived to the top of the mountains and they started to resolve the problems. For water, they built canals, aqueducts. For agriculture, terraces, andenes. They managed also the weather. They did huge restoration. For that reason, Acción Andina, and ECOAN, using that information, we are trying to restore or try to capture those ancestral practices. I'm a scientist. I love to read a lot of the history, and also I did a lot of research with many people. But what we discovered is if the problem is a huge, like the climate change, we need a huge medicine also. With the local people, we are trying to manage a big restoration campaign along all the Andes. We are using a polylepis tree. This polylepis tree is the highest forest in the world, grows about 5,000 meters sea level, where the water comes. And is in that way, from Venezuela to near to the Patagonia, there is 45 species growing along all that. On the last 5 years, with Acción Andina, I helped to plant 10 million trees on the last 5 years in Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Chile, Bolivia, and Argentina. We are trying to do more, of course, with the communal work. That is the main practice in these communities. And I want to tell you, if it's not going to be water, it's not going to be life. No economy, no biodiversity, and probably no Amazonian rainforest. Why? The water comes from the mountains. We are trying to protect that. We want to secure that. Even better, every time the youth is claiming loudness, please give us a green planet, a healthy planet, because they don't want to live on the dead rock. For that reason, I invite you to be part of this program. Let's take action. In other case, I don't know what's going to happen in the future.
Thank you, Costantino. Ladies and gentlemen, the challenges for saving the Amazon are as big as the Amazon itself. However, as you well know, we are living in the age of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, blockchain technology, and we are now finally back to space exploration. It is our generation's privilege to be able to access those disruptive technologies to help solving humanity's greatest problems. We have, just among our panelists and our audience, the resources and the expertise to save the Amazon and to keep it for future generations. Let's work together to unleash the power of the markets in harmony with governments and NGOs to value the Amazon rainforest more alive than any other economic alternative. Thank you so much.